from the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
2 weeks out from the NFL draft, we are going to be spending some time on the top 10, how things are going to shake out, and what the Broncos could be looking forward to there at pick number 9. But we're going to start the show tonight, Ben, on the opt-outs of OTAs. We now have 5 teams. As we're recording this right now, we have 5 teams that are in some form or fashion going to be sitting out phase 1 of OTAs. Now, the NFL has put out their entire schedule for the offseason. We can get to that here in a little bit. But more than anything here, the Broncos were kind of leading the way. We had this information yesterday, and we kind of wanted to let it simmer a little bit, see what the rest of the league, kind of how their response was to it. These are voluntary. Okay, just want to make sure we put that out there. These are voluntary workouts. There's not really a lot of on-field stuff anyways. Most of the stuff is weight training and film room. But the players felt it in their best interest due to the pandemic and safety to not attend this first phase of OTAs. What was your reaction to it?
Well, my first reaction to it is a team that missed the playoffs, that's bad optics. Whatever you feel about the safety or anything else, that's bad optics. So you got to delve that into a little bit deeper. If they feel that it's unsafe, hey, who am I to tell somebody else what they feel is unsafe or not? That said, I do know that with regard to the Denver Broncos, it was a split locker room. Now, not everyone was in agreement on the decision. They all agreed to support each other publicly. But not everyone was in agreement on that decision. In fact, there were a lot of prominent people that said that they needed to be in here. There are some additional caveats to this. Workout bonuses that might be contingent on it. You know, guys are going to have to come in and do that. Guys who are wanting to work out and people are like, well, they can work out on their own. Well, if you work out on your own, that's fine. However, if you were to be injured working out on your own, you are not covered under insurance, where if you worked out here at the facility, you are covered under team insurance. So there are some caveats to this. There are some things that are that players who voted one way are finding out now. And I suspect that you'll see players show up, especially those with hefty workout bonuses, will show up and work out after all.
Von Miller's one of those guys, by the way, with a hefty workout bonus. And there are some teams, I'm glad you kind of pointed that out before we continue on. There are some teams out there that do structure their contracts in that way. 5 prominent teams, the Jags, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Packers are just some of the examples of teams that will probably not go in on this, what the NFLPA is trying to do here with their offseason scheduling. And then this is a little bit of this is the NFLPA trying to flex a little bit. And then so people
That's
will
a part of it, yeah.
People will definitely look at this as to the Broncos, as you mentioned, a 5-win team. You guys really need to spend some time on the field, even if it is voluntary. But then you have to come back to the other side and say, this is a bigger picture thing. And that's what we said on the show yesterday, is that when it comes to this, J.C. Treader kind of laid out all of this way ahead of time. So for me, I wasn't really surprised to see that note yesterday.
Yeah, and you're right. The NFLPA is trying to grab power where they can because it is one of the weaker players' unions in sports. Because the contracts are not fully guaranteed for the players, it's always going to be that way until that changes. So for now, they try to grab where they can, and this is one of those things. Grab some powers on OTA and those kinds of things. Unfortunately, I think that hurts teams in the long run, but it is what it is. And players can make their own decisions. Who am I to tell another man what to do with his body or with his money? That said, again, this is a bad look for a team that, finished sub 500 last year. So we'll see. We'll see how everything goes from there. The NFL's laid out some of its ideas and policies going forward. It's going to strongly encourage vaccines, but not mandate them. And that's also a bone of contention because there are some players that feel they should be mandated, and there are some players that feel they should be able to refuse to take them. So that has become a bit of a bone of contention as well, and it remains to be seen how that's going to be resolved. But as it stands, the league's policy is going to be strongly suggest but not mandate.
It's interesting, and I think the sticking point for a lot of fans is the line in the statement of, despite having a completely virtual offseason last year, the quality of play across the NFL was better than ever by almost every measure. That feels a little bit disingenuous.
That's a PR statement.
It is, and I understand why they're coming at that. And there are some numbers, and our good friend Andrew Mason pointed this out. There are some numbers you can point to that are reasons for that. The drops, the tackling, missed tackling, those numbers actually did improve, or at least look good. But one of the reasons we did see scoring up And one of the reasons why they can point to this as being some sort of version of a stat is because penalties were significantly down, especially on the offensive side of the ball. A major shift in the way the game is being officiated changed a lot of what we ultimately saw on the field.
Right. And that decision was made, interestingly enough, because the league felt like the televised product would suffer with more penalties. If you have long gaps with no crowd in place to boo, all of a sudden it becomes magnified on the television. And that's why that decision was. A lot of people don't know that. That's why that decision was made to de-emphasize. I mean, call blatant egregious stuff, but the stuff that's borderline or anticipatory, let's let those go. And penalties were down as a result, and they felt like the televised product was. Hopefully they stick with that even when the crowds are there. But they feel like the booing the refs is a part of the presentation and the pageantry of football. So, I think the league will whenever crowds are fully back, I think the league will go back to calling penalties at the rate they did.
It's interesting. It almost reminds me of when I used to work in banking.
Well, you were booed every day.
Basically, I was the man. Everybody hated me. But when I worked in banking, they had worked into penalties, like people having overdraft charges, all that stuff. That was worked into the budget every year. And it's just like, really? Like that? Like we worked that in because it's part of the pageantry of banking.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of
people
what it is.
People like to feel like they got a deal when they come in and complain about things.
But one last thing I just want to check in with you on. You said that it wasn't universal in the locker room, and that makes a lot of sense. We even saw the Patriots saying that it wasn't going to be universal for them. You're saying you might see players show up anyways. Is this going to potentially cause a little bit of rift?
I don't think so. I think everybody understands the nature of the business as long as there is a public unity. If they show up to work out, just get it in. Basically, I would say that the leadership council within the team would have made it clear that you don't want to Instagram that. Those workouts are not, if you're working out on your own, go ahead, but don't sit there and publicly put out those kinds of things in defiance of the unified front that we're putting out on this issue.
That makes a lot of sense. When we come back, we're going to check in 2 weeks out from the NFL draft. What does the top 10 look like according to Ben? Get to it next. Welcome back to Broncos Country. Tonight we are 2 weeks out from the NFL draft. All very exciting, especially with the Broncos sitting there at pick number 9 inside the top 10. What are they going to do? They got an option at a quarterback. Well, Ben, you put out your best guess of the top 8 picks before the Broncos pick at number 9 yesterday. And even that is, I imagine, probably something that changes constantly from what you hear around the league. But I thought it would be a cool exercise to go over the top 8. On the other side, we'll look at the options for the Broncos there at pick number 9. So assuming no trade up, at least right now, let's start with the top 8. Number 1, no question, obviously, Trevor Lawrence.
Right. Jacksonville has keyed in on Trevor Lawrence, and that's been pretty obvious from the get-go. There's no real debate there about anything else. I know there have been people that have suggested that maybe he would look at Fields because of a connection to Urban Meyer. There isn't one. That was Ryan Day, and that had nothing to do with Urban Meyer. So it's Trevor Lawrence. I don't think we need to get too much into the deep end, into the weeds on that. That's pretty obvious.
Okay, Zach Wilson will be going number 2 overall.
99%, unless something changes, and the Jets brass is out at Fields Pro Day. So unless something changes, and it would have to be a drastic change internally, then it would be Zach Wilson.
You were talking early on in the pre-draft process about Zach Wilson and how there are some teams out there that might have him as number 1 on their board. And so this is a situation where if you're the New York Jets and you do have him as number 1, you're pretty thrilled that he's there for you at number 2. So I think that's always something just to keep in mind. It's not universal. These rankings of the quarterbacks, rankings of these prospects is not universal across the board. This is just kind of where they slot in based on what you're hearing from the teams.
Right. And if you're a team at, for instance, number 3, and you have Zach Wilson number 1 on your board, well, you'd love for the Jets to fall in love with Justin Fields or something.
100%.
Just saying.
All right, so we've kind of framed this throughout most of the pre-draft process as the draft starts at number 3, right? So we kind of got through the first 2 very quickly because that's just what it is. Number 3, the 49ers, who traded up, of course, from 12. What are they looking to do here?
Well, I've heard 2 different names here, and neither one of them is McCorkle, despite the other stuff. So, no one.
That's a
I'm telling
heartbreaker.
you, the conversation. I know, and if you're a Broncos fan, you're hoping it's Mac Jones because that pushes right. But everybody I've talked to, and I have had conversation after conversation, we all wind up with the same kind of laughter that, why are the Niners is Kyle Shanahan just trolling everybody with this? Because nobody believes it. Nobody believes it'll be Mac Jones until Mac Jones' name is on that card. I'm telling you, no one in the league believes this. So it's interesting. We've been back and forth over this. I put Trey Lance in there just because that's the first name I've heard. I do know they like Justin Fields.
If you're picking right now, just because we're doing what your best guess is,
we'll go with Trey Lance, but I it could be either one. We'll just go with what I put on the list.
All right, so you have Trey Lance right now as going number 3 to the 49ers. That puts Atlanta on the clock at 4.
I think it's a be Pitts in that, but it could be Fields. Lance is the preferred candidate by Terry Fontenot. Fontenot is the general manager of the Atlanta Falcons. He was the runner-up here in Denver for the job.
But a reminder that Arthur Smith wants to run it back with Matt Ryan.
Arthur Smith wants to run it back with Matt Ryan, has experience with veteran quarterbacks. He had Ryan Tannehill there in Tennessee, and obviously his offense is predicated on a lot of max protect, 3-route stuff with getting 2 receivers and a tight end out there in the route. And what better tight end to get out there than Kyle Pitts, who comes along and looks like a generational, I know we love that word, prospect. So I think that there's an internal struggle there. And I say struggle, there's a disagreement there that they're going to have to work out. The general manager wants Trey Lance. The head coach wants Kyle Pitts. The owner kind of likes Justin Fields. He may or may not be there. It's kind of interesting to see how that's going to fall. I put Pitts in there for now. But, again, we got 2 weeks till draft day.
Okay, so no trades so far other than the 49ers one that happened a while back. So now we're at pick number 5 with Cincinnati. What's your best guess there?
I think it's going to be Chase. A lot of people are putting Penny Sewell in there, and Penny Sewell's a lot lower on quite a few boards than people think. He's very young, and that's not to say that he couldn't become the prospect a lot of people envision, but he's lower on people's boards, I think, than media and fans tend to think. That's not to say that somebody won't take him early. That's not to say the Bengals won't take him early. But I think, Zach Taylor is kind of getting into the I got to win mode.
Yeah.
And obviously they've had some receiver turnover there in Cincinnati. That would be an excellent guy to add to T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd that they've got there. I think they want Pitts, but I'm not sure he's going to be there. So I think it's Pitts, Chase, and then they consider an offensive tackle if both those two are gone. I don't think they're both going to be gone. There have been teams calling them about a trade back, but from what I understand, Cincinnati has not been very welcoming about conversations to trade back. So
because they want to get their guy.
I think they're keyed in on their guy there, and I don't think that where they would trade back would guarantee them their guy.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. If they trade back to, say, 9 with the Broncos,
that presents a problem because you've got several teams in front of you, including the Lions, who may be on a receiver that kind of pushes all those guys that they really want out of the picture.
All right, so reunited, and it feels so good there in Cincinnati. What about Miami, number 6?
Well, this could be another Peaches and Herb conversation as you maybe reunite Tua Tagovailoa with his guy, Devontae Smith, if this plays out the way it is. Some people have talked about Waddle being the guy there as well. So we're most of us, when we talk, we're pretty convinced it's a Bama wide receiver. The question is which one. I've talked to some people that last year gave me excellent intel with the Dolphins organization, and they seem to think it's Smith. So that's what I'm rolling with for now until we hear otherwise. Again, we're 2 weeks out, so this could change. But as it stands, as it's hearing from the conversations that I've had, I think it's Devonta Smith. I know people have made accusations about the size and all that. Well, I didn't stop Deshaun Jackson, and they're about the same size. So
Justin Fields continues to slip in this draft. Number 7, Detroit. What do they do?
This is an interesting one because I think Detroit is definitely looking at wide receivers. But I think they go Micah Parsons here. I think he's kind of the type of guy and the type of attitude that Dan Campbell wants on defense. You can put him in that will spot. Maybe you project him as a Mike. I think he's a will. You put him in that will spot. You gotta to use an overhyped football cliche, a tone setter on that defensive side. And so I would not be surprised. I know a lot of the Detroit fans didn't like that when I put that in there. I got a lot of feedback about that. But I think that they are very cognizant of the fact that they don't have an identity on defense, despite the fact they had a defensive head coach and years of a defensive identity. They don't really have a defensive identity.
All right, number 8 now with the Carolina Panthers.
And I think this is the trade-up. I think it's the trade-up point. Whether you're Washington, whether you're New England, whether you're Denver, I think that's the trade-up point. I have New England trading up to take Justin Fields right there. I don't think New England's in on Lance, but they would look at Mac Jones or Justin Fields. Washington, I think, likes Trey Lance more than the others. New England trades up here with Carolina. Carolina gets to move back, still get their offensive lineman. Broncos get jumped for Fields, who, if he fell in their lap, they might look at. That Presents an interesting conundrum for Denver there at 9.
Definitely does. So when we come back, we'll talk about the options for the Broncos at pick number 9. All right, welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight. We've gone through the first 8 picks based on Ben Allbright's best guess here. Lawrence, Wilson, Lance to the 49ers, Pitts going Atlanta, Jamar Chase to Cincinnati, Devontae Smith to Miami, Micah Parsons to Detroit, and you have New England, at least right now, penciled in as the trade-up spot to number 8 for Carolina. They take Justin Fields, but as you mentioned earlier, Washington could be in play. Could be some other team.
Chicago could be in play as well.
Chicago,
I didn't mention them.
Right, coming from 20. So there are other options there, but now we get to the Broncos at pick number 9 and what they're going to be looking at, because now the top 4 quarterbacks are all off the board. So unless you love McCorkle Jones,
I, based on conversations I've had, don't believe that the Broncos would be in on Mac Jones.
So then they're looking at some version of the top 2 offensive tackles, Rashawn Slater, Penei Sewell. They're looking at the top cornerback option in Patrick Surtain as a couple of options. J.C. Horn, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not saying they're into him, but that'd be my dude. I guess Caleb Farley, I guess we can sort of pencil in there. You could look at one of the pass rushers, either Kwity Paye, or you could look at Jalen Phillips. So those are kind of the options there. They're not going to go wide receiver, so I'm not going to put Jalen Waddle in that conversation. So we put those are kind of the options there, or trade back. Broncos are sitting at 9. What do they do?
Well, I think at that point, and given what's available, I think trade back would be an option they would definitely try to do. I think they would look heavily into seeing if they could do that, and if somebody wanted Mac Jones to come up and get him, whether that's Washington or Chicago, see if they could get him.
Would this be a disappointing turnout for the Broncos if the board fell this way? I
think for fans it might be.
Yes, I think it would.
I think for the team it not necessarily would be. I think that they're comfortable if one of those quarterbacks, a very specific quarterback, falls in their lap. I think they would be comfortable with that. But I really don't think they're attempting to make a move up right now. That could change. We got pro days over the next couple of days, and that could change. But from what I understand right now, I don't think a trade up is actually in the cards. They've called to make kind of inquiry on that, but I don't think they're leaning that way.
I mean, and this is one of those things with the trade up, and we've talked about this with John Elway in the past, where some of these things you work out ahead of time. Hey, if this guy happens to be there at pick number 6 or something along those lines, talking to Miami, hey, listen, if our guy happens to be there, this is what we're willing to offer you.
Right.
If he's not there, then we're not going to trade up with you, obviously. But if he is, we think we have to get ahead of this team, and this team in order to get him. So that would be kind of interesting. By the way, your mock having Carolina not taking Justin Fields, slipping to them right there, I found that kind of interesting.
I don't think he's the one they're after either.
Okay.
I think that there are some quarterbacks, picking 8, 9, and on back that are hoping a different guy falls to them than that, and that's anyway.
Okay, so they're going to immediately look to trade back. What if they can't trade back? At that moment, pick number 9, they have their options at the best pass rushers.
Yeah, they couldn't trade. So in this scenario, they could not trade back.
Best offensive tackles, best cornerbacks.
Right. Parsons is gone, so, whatever you think of him is gone. I think you got to look at this and say, okay, are we really drafting what's going to be a 4th corner for us? Is Patrick Surtain the guy? Do we believe in him? And he would be CB1 in that particular instance here. I really think that they would look long and hard at Rashawn Slater. I know a lot of people, again, talk about Penei Sewell. Slater has a versatility that Sewell doesn't have the technique issues that Sewell has had. Sewell gets out over his skis and gets over-leveraged a lot, and that's something that's going to have to be coached out of him. I'm not saying Mike Munchak can't do that, but I'm saying that Slater comes in more ready to play right now, and he can play 5 positions along the offensive line. And I think that is what plays into his favor specifically here. Because Dalton Risner got a little dinged up last year. We don't know if Lloyd Cushenberry is the guy at center. And I know, like I said, there's different ways you could juggle that. Graham Glasgow, he was okay, but I think they want to get to Netani Moody eventually. And then Jawan James, we don't know. He hasn't really played much football in the last 2 seasons. They're hoping to get their money out of him this year. But, if he doesn't work out, then what are your options at right tackle? Calvin Anderson, that's a gigantic question mark. I love Calvin Anderson, but that's a big question mark. So I think going out and getting a Rashawn Slater solidifies your options. And if you have any injuries or have any problems, you can plug him in almost anywhere. versus a Penny Sewell who's probably a left tackle only. And you already have one of those in Garrett Bowles. You'd have to convert Penny to the right side. So I think that in that very specific scenario that we've laid out, I think Rashawn Slater would be somebody that would be at or near the top of the board.
So option 1 would be to trade back if the board fell that way.
Right.
Option 2, you'd stay put and just take an elite player at a position that's very high in your board, knowing that you're drafting on strength, but it's for the future because you might move on from Juwan James as soon
After
as next
the year
year.
anyway, right.
And Rashawn Slater can immediately be your right tackle, stud guy right there. That, I mean, your bookends are all set on the offensive line, and away we go.
And you got a great offensive line for either Drew Lock or a future quarterback that you get it's already built. The skill positions are built. You have a plug-and-play offense to make whatever quarterback you ultimately get super successful. So in that specific scenario, I think that'd be the case. If the Broncos do trade back, I think your top 2 options to look at would be J.O.K. and Najee Harris.
I know. You keep saying running back.
Not
that
I agree with it. I think Najee's great talent.
Oh,
but I think if they trade back, I think those aren't the only options. But I think those are very much in the discussion.
All right, clearly, still a very fluid situation. Of course, we're going to continue to cover it right here on Broncos Country Tonight.
Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight. Tune in to Broncos TV every weeknight at 6:30, right here on KTVD Channel 20.